The topic of this accompanying video is the importance of this model. To express why I think this model is so important, I want to investigate the way that this model can be used to understand our modern society. Now, I'm no cynic, and I don't think our society is just broken in pieces, irreparable, damaged beyond salvaging, just completely trash or anything like that. I do think there are a lot of problems with our society in quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I think that we can address those problems. And so that's why I think that this 4 quadrants model is really important, because it allows us to see these problems in the different quadrants and then try to address them with solutions. And it also lets us track how an issue in one quadrant can move to another quadrant, and then how a solution can also originate from one quadrant but move to another quadrant as well and help solve a problem in a different quadrant. So in diving into this modern society and using this 4 quadrant model to help explain this modern society, I want to start with quadrant 1 because it's the most simple, and I think it's a good jumping off point and kind of leads and tracks to some other quadrants in its through lines. You hear people often talking about today that we have a meaning crisis or a meaninglessness crisis in our world, and that many people just feel like there's no meaning to life. They don't have a purpose. They don't have a value. They feel like they don't have a sense of safety. They don't have a sense of meaning. They don't have a sense of connection, other things like this. And a lot of people speak on this issue, and I think that they're generally true. The general conversation anyhow about this topic is generally true. You can see that a lot of people sort of just don't have faith in any of our institutions or systems or in the cultures that surround them. You can see that a lot of people are lacking in some sort of personal meaning or some belief in a moral system or a belief in a commonality system between people or a belief in sort of what you should and shouldn't do in a society, and that when you uphold what you should and shouldn't do in society and those morals and those norms and stuff, that it is of benefit to you, that you are rewarded in society by participating in a good way. I think you can see online a lot of cynicism and nihilism in a lot of young people especially. And when I say young people, I mean generally under 40. That's where I'm at, barely. A lot of people in this age range are sort of checking out, from the quiet quitting to checking out of health and normal routines to friend and social events and groups and gatherings. Some of that has to do with COVID and a big change to our life there, change to our habits and our patterns and stuff. And because of this lack of meaning and this overall negativity that's a main driving force in their lives, you see people doing things from the sort of like the nuisance YouTube videos, the pranks in public, where they just sort of like swipe someone's food or someone's like dining outdoors, or they do like those car smashing videos. I've seen those where the guys kind of like, they go like this and they jump backwards and they just like land on someone's car and just like smash their windshield or smash their hood or like even the top of the car. They just put a big like body indent in it. And a lot of these people doing these videos don't even hide their face. They don't mask or cover up. So they not only don't have faith in our institutions, but they also don't fear them, like repercussion from the law or anything like that, or even repercussion from the culture. They just don't care about any of it. And they're willing to do whatever they want and sort of screw over other people or intrude on other people's life or just be a general asshole to people, just so they can get clicks, get likes, maybe get some money. You know, it's all just to support themselves. And there's a very self-centered behavior that comes with that. And you can link that possibly to our addiction to social media cultures, online presence cultures, where you're always trying to present your best self. You always want to be what's trending or popping off, right? And so these things kind of isolate a worldview to yourself. They make you self-centered, and then people just kind of do crazy things and just be a disruptive hellion, you know, in society. And then there's another breed of people who don't do it outside actual like physical damage and vandalism or, you know, knocking food out of people's hand on the street, but you get them online doing a lot of commentary, other content creators, etc. There's one famous one that a lot of people know now who's kind of gone off the deep end more and more, Asmongold. He has lately said things akin to, I'm not going to ever vote for someone who's not going to make my life better. I'm not going to vote for someone who's going to specifically make someone else's life better and not my own. It's cynical, and it says you don't care about other people's experiences. You don't care about other people's strife and struggles. It's also short-sighted because that kind of behavior also doesn't create community and social groups and allies or friends or anything like that. And those things help in either individual life, quadrant 1, or collective quadrant 3 things. If you're trying to have a movement, then creating allies, creating other groups that are going to help you support your cause because you help them support yours, those things help in quadrant 3 movements. And likewise, in the same sort of group as the Asmongold type content creators, that mindset these days, I'm using him as an example because so many people online know who he is now, especially in the slightly political space. They know who he is. He is now sort of on board with the Trump for memes, Trump for content kind of thing, because there are people who are drastically and severely impacted by Trump's policies, even policies prior to Trump, from what Musk is doing, cutting all those federal employees, cutting benefits. And some of those benefits were extremely necessary for people's survival, for older people, people with disabilities, people who are going in for an operation soon. There were all sorts of horror stories that already within the first 3 weeks of people suffering. And Asmongold and others like him are just sort of going, oh, hey, yeah, this is funny. Hey, yeah, this is cool. And the Asmongold type kind of does this like, oh, it's just truth, it's just logic, it's just reason, I'm just looking out for myself, that's just logical, that's just what everybody does, it is what it is, boys. That's not true. That's not how everybody is. Not everybody is that unhealthy or that much of like a festering swamp in quadrant 1 that when they come out to the collective quadrant 3, that they're just toxic to the people around them, and they just sort of wave off other people's problems and experiences and say, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to do that for you. There's no way I'm going to support you. Why would I do that? That's not logical. But it is logical to help other people. We are communal creatures. We are creatures that form groups, that form connections. And even if it's someone that you don't know, that you don't even know that you helped them specifically, we like doing that as human beings. A lot of us do. Those of us who are healthy in quadrant 1 and are not caustic towards the world. Wrapping up this quadrant 1 issue, if we follow a track line, we can see that track line goes from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2. And sorry, P-Pants, I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit here, but my sister had a time in her life where she was a lot more critical and judgmental of others, a lot more cynical towards the world, a lot more, oh, just everything kind of sucks, everything's broken and bad. And she got into some quadrant 2 bad habits and unhealthy lifestyles. She and her husband still kind of joke that, oh, they're still cynics and they're still cynical. But I personally have seen her grow and change so much. When I see her now, she seems to enjoy and be connected to so many more things around her, people and routines and hobbies, and she's more connected to herself. She's more happy in herself. She has purpose. She found meaning, and it has drastically improved her life. But for some people, they haven't sort of recovered or crawled out of that. So their quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 individual quadrants are just extremely unhealthy, like a festering swamp, just really doing themselves a lot of damage. And then you can take that into the quadrant 3, where we build culture, and that's where you get the Alex Jones of the world, you get the conspiracy theories, you get entire groups that cater to that and try to pull people in, and in that space there's people trying to scam you, trying to sell you stuff, famously Alex Jones, always trying to sell you something. And so in that quadrant 3, it kind of explodes and it gets huge, and you get people on different sides, and you get cynical people on either side just really hating each other and just really being judgmental and critical without any sort of rebuilding or reconstruction across your conflicting ideas. And this is basically what we call the culture war. We are extremely reactionary, and we want instant gratification and instant destruction of our enemies. And we sort of love just seeing people destroyed, even if it brings us no benefit and doesn't really even bring them benefit, or like the people around them benefit either. It would be better to rehabilitate them. It would be better to build them up and help them and return to the world. And of course, you can follow that track line to quadrant 4 as well, where you will see news media outlets, Fox News, OAN, etc., Places like that specifically form structures so that they can make profit off of these things, off of these conspiracy groups, and off of people who are just looking to find rage, looking to find that anger. If you look at the Facebook algorithm, it was specifically designed to agitate people and make people pissed off at each other. And once these structures in Quadrant 4 are sort of built to keep people there, spending and buying your stuff. And so they're going to sell you whatever message you want to hear. And people just want to stay there because that line from The Dark Knight, some people just want to watch the world burn, is not just some people anymore. It is a massive group of individuals, and it is a massive culture in Quadrant 1 and 3 respectively, that are people that just want to burn each other down or watch the world burn. Or they feel, well, the world is on fire, it's burning down, just sort of give up. Just be this nihilistic, negative person. And for the overall health of a society, these things are not good. Last example that I want to give is one that I think is really important. And it's important to me because I find myself leaning left politically and socially. But I also see a sad predicament among some of the people on the left, some groups, not everyone. The problem is that we'll advocate for these great collective Quadrant 3 and Quadrant 4 changes, either in legislation and structure or mindset and education and things like that. And they'll recognize that there is so much negativity and trauma and people being wronged, marginalization and oppression and things like that happening to possibly themselves, but also to other people around them. And they want that to be improved, but they kind of think, how can I possibly do self-love and me time and like dote on myself if there's so much wrong in the world? I can't possibly bring myself to like kind of like spoil myself and just indulge myself, right? But I think that this leads to a highly negative outcome, not only just for Quadrant 1 self, but because Quadrant 3 is comprised of Quadrant 1 individuals. If the self is not taken care of, it leads back to Quadrant 3, and that leads to problems. And this is kind of a touchy subject for people, but I want to get into it. So when I see people on the left doing, a lot of deconstruction and doing a lot of breaking down, they find all of these problems. And it's very good that we've done the deconstruction and we've identified so many of these problems and places where marginalized people are like under oppression or other things like that. But what I find a lot of leftists don't do is reconstruct something positive again. And they also don't reconstruct own personal Quadrant 1, self-help and meaning for themselves. I mean, deep personal self-love, important for your own decompression and for your own reconstruction, because you've done deconstruction of society and of the self and of our problems, but they kind of fail to do the reconstruction. And what that does is leave them a lot more pessimistic, nihilistic, empty, and caustic. And individuals on the left who can get caught like this end up as these kind of more vile, caustic people. And they have really good intentions for the Quadrant 3, Quadrant 4 problems. But what they're not doing is bringing their positive best self into that Quadrant 3 discussion. And this is where it's going to get a little sensitive. So in the recent election, there was all this talk of this was going to be the era for women. This is going to be the election for women. But it actually was an election that men decided the outcome heavily by where they voted. The majority of men, I don't remember the number, specifically voted for Trump. And even the majority of white women voted for Trump as well. And I think there was so much of this anti-woke, anti-DEI, anti-LGBTQ, information and elitism, anti-woke kind of stuff going on. And part of that, I think, was a adolescent rebuttal on the right. And what I mean by that is these sort of all men are trash, white men are trash, you guys are the problem, or messaging like that is a bit extreme and revolutionarily minded and over the top, alienated the other side away from you because it had that caustic spin on it. And I think that comes from a Quadrant 1 deficiency of self-love and happiness and base acceptance and personal meaning. And when carried into Quadrant 3, that became this really toxic atmosphere that instead of finding an ally in someone, it was spitting in their face and turning them into an enemy. And I'm not advocating for coddling those that have privilege and stuff like that, because white men do have a certain privilege over other marginalized groups' experiences. White men do not have the experience that black men have with police. They do not have the experience with sexual assault that women have. They do not have the experience of fear of their life or being beaten or bullied that members of the LGBTQ community have. But so many white men are also just dirt poor. Their material conditions are absolute crap. They have been marginalized by society, by our capitalistic system. They've been pushed out and destroyed. And when that happened, so much of the caustic Quadrant 3 was easily clippable, can be put online and farmed for views and farmed by the right wing and that farther right perspective to say, oh my, look how bad the woke people are. They're calling you trash. They're calling you the problem, but you're just some dirt poor person trying to make it in their life too, and you have nothing. And that person was like, why, how am I the problem? Yes, there's a lot of injustice in the world, but you still have to take care of Quadrant 1 self, and the results are Quadrant 4. Trump is president, should say Elon's president. And of course, I'm not saying that it is the fault of this nihilistic or more cynical group of leftists that made the election and the current situation swing the way it did. There was a decades-long concerted effort to sow distrust, and not even just distrust, but disinterest in the truth. We aren't even, as a society, really interested in the objective truth anymore, especially that society that exists in the Quadrant 3 culture online. And there are a lot of people who say, oh, I just care about the objective truth. I'm just interested in the facts and logic and reasoning and truth. And they're just plainly not. Asmongold, again, to bring him up, is someone who consistently talks about things on his channel using the phrases, it is what it is, you know it, I know it. But the fact is, things aren't always as standard as what he says they are. And sometimes he just purports the exact opposite of the truth on many issues, but he doesn't care. As long as he says afterwards, I just care about the truth. That's all I care about is the truth. I'm just a truth sayer. I'm just saying it how it is. Then no one cares. And the people in his audience believe him, and they don't actually care to check because they want their feelings validated and their viewpoint validated, not actually double checked against the facts. And we can check these facts. We do have institutions and agencies of truth in our societies, in our cultures, in Quadrant 3 and Quadrant 4, but there is such distrust in those agencies or institutions of truth that we don't even bother to find out anymore. We are totally disinterested in even looking. Skepticism and double checking are of course great things, and we should always try to find those sources that are peer reviewed or that have a long history of reporting something that is truthful. But a general distrust of all truth is really, really bad for a society. It leads to a complete and total disinterest in what is the actual truth at all. And all of that just leads right back to Quadrant 3 and Quadrant 4, conspiracy theories, Alex Jones-isms, and then it leads right into Quadrant 4, other institutions and structures and algorithms, all designed to make a profit or to sort of cordon off and put these things in an echo chamber and just watch them grow. And this sort of pessimistic, nihilistic, or cynical progressivism doesn't help anything at all. Not only does it make an enemy out of someone who could be an ally by accelerating the combative nature between these two different sides often enough, and it can sort of alienate someone who actually is very similar to you and would believe and benefit from the same structure that these progressive groups want to put forward, but you push them away instead. Not only that, but it also can turn someone who already is an ally and in your space into someone who is an enemy, or to create a lot of tension and distrust among people on the left. And there's a character who's a well-known left progressive public figure, Hassan Piker, and there's sort of an old news issue, and I want to bring it up for an example within this video, not necessarily just for the old news of it, but Hassan's house as an issue. For those of you that don't know, Hassan is a leftist and progressive political streamer and commentator. He's a political commentator, and he bought a $3 million house, roughly $3 million house in California. I believe it's LA. And there's a lot of leftists that had a really big problem with that. And I think that there's two issues with this that I'd like to bring up. The first being that the leftists that have a huge problem with Hassan owning a house, even though it is $3 million, I think come from the perspective of someone who's lost the point in their nihilism and criticism and emptiness that they kind of feel in their quadrant 1 and their quadrant 3 and 4, seeing all the systems break, kind of seeing everything the way it is. They can kind of just sit and go, everything's crap, everything's broken, I hate it all, nothing works the way it's supposed to, all of our lives are garbage, and they don't have a house, and they probably don't have any prospects or future or any sort of guarantee that they ever will have a house. And then they see someone like Hassan get a house, and not any house, but a $3 million house, and they see that as the problem. But buying a house is not the problem. They have lost the point of what this progressivism is intended to do. This progressivism is intended to advocate that everybody should be able to buy a house, that that should be the norm, that we should have institutions that do work to help people and make people's lives better. It shouldn't be just to deconstruct and break everything down and be critical and then just go, I hate it all, and no one should have anything nice. But that is a mindset and a view within some people on the left. The other thing I want to mention with Hassan's house is the power of a zero. I think has 6 zeros tacked onto his salary. He's making $1 million or $2 or $3 million a year, something like that. Maybe it's more now, but I don't think it's 7 0. That is 2 more zeros than what I got. And I am making it's roughly 1 to 4%, something like that, of what Hassan is making. And while that seems like a really big problem, the next 2 zeros on Hassan are where the real problem lies. Cool. Those people who have 2 zeros on Hassan are making 50 million, 800 million, 200 million a year. And there could even be people that are making 3 or 4 zeros on Hassan as well. But the problem is with the power of the zero. I think that a lot of people don't understand how important, how powerful that zero is, and that any zero is not equal to another zero. The same 2 zeros that Hassan has on me are not the same 2 zeros as the guy who has 2 zeros on Hassan, especially when that money is made on the backs of other people's labors whose livelihoods depend on that labor. And the person who's making 2 zeros on Hassan is doing things like denying right to unionize, offering poor incentives and salary. So a lot of these workers are existing at the poverty line or below it, or just barely above it, which is not the American dream as I remember it, good or the point as I see it. So those certain caustic, nihilistic groups within the left coming at Hassan is counterproductive to getting things done. Not that you have to agree with everything any other person in the political group says or believes, but that sort of fighting with someone who is already an ally can then make things worse as well. I'm going to bring you up again, P-Pants. My little sister, was able to buy a house before me, years before me. And there was a time in her life where she would have been much more negative about the prospects of her being able to buy a house. But now she understands that she can buy a house, and it is to be expected. And the property value of her house is even going up. So that's a great thing. And she, at one point, would have sat in that dissatisfied squalor and just been like, I hate it, everything's broken, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. But she's grown out of that negativity, and it's because she grew in quadrant 1. And all this is not to say that because of this leftist infighting or this progressive distrust within progressives led to all of this. Again, not throwing blame there because they're working against forces far beyond our control that have been set up for decades and decades. But I am saying that it does matter. It does influence our quadrant 3 culture when we don't do work on ourselves in quadrant 1. But this example is close to my heart because I personally have seen old friends that are very left-wing they've become very cynical and pessimistic and like nihilistic towards the whole thing. And they kind of dropped everything for themselves and just went head on like villainizing what they already saw as the other side, as the other people that are the problem in society. And well, if you alienate them, they literally are going to be the other side in a quadrant 4 election. And it's going to cause a lot of damage. And I think that this 4 quadrants tool is a good way to express them and understand all of these issues in our modern society. So thanks again for listening. It was a bit of a heavier topic and closer to my heart. But if you have anything you'd like to say, if you'd like to refute things that I said, go ahead. If you'd like to add to it something you saw or another way that you can see that this model is so important, I hope if you ever see this, P-Pants, you're not insulted. But I just wanted to use a personal example to explain that we are all capable of falling into our own traps, and then cultural traps and structural traps from quadrant 1, 3, and 4, and quadrant 2 traps of like bad routines and bad choices. But we can come out of it, and my sister has done that marvelously. My sister, in so many metrics in our modern day world, is doing way better than me. Again, thanks for watching. This was close to my heart, so I made it. Let me know if you think I'm wrong about something. Cool.